Uh, Magic makers. I have written a list, literally of 70 things I wanted to talk about on this podcast. And this was up at the top of the list. And I finally have got Miss Jill Coleman here to talk about moderation. Now I know before you guys roll your eyes, moderation, that's for losers. No one can do moderation. Moderation sucks. Let me just tell you, this lovely lady has broken it down with I'm going to say it, a process that doesn't involve white knuckling. It doesn't involve extremes. It is a way for you to finally be able to not mainstream the Skittles and end up with 7-Eleven with your underwear on your head, wondering how you got there. Welcome to the show, Jill Coleman.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited. And I love that you said that about moderation, because as soon as you say that word, the eyes roll, right? Like that's the first thing is people are like, yeah, moderation. People's eyes just gloss over. So yeah, I'm pumped to kind of break this down for people so it feels a little more tangible.
I laugh because you and I have a very similar past. And probably 15 years ago, if you said to us moderation, we would have the same thing. And we would have been like, there's no way I can be moderate for maybe 30 days. I can be moderate to get ready for a show, a vacation, but life, the hell you speak.
One of the things that I actually probably wouldn't have thought it was hardcore enough, to be honest. Like I would have been like, oh, like your grandma does moderation, right? Like that's for like older folks. Like that's not for me. Like I'm a competitor, right? Like I'm a fitness professional. I'm someone who, like we go, like I'm more hardcore than that. So I think that was it would have seemed number one, impossible to your point, but it also would have seemed like I was giving up, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's funny you say that because like right now, as we speak, and hopefully this will go away, but I don't think it will, the 75 hard, right? And so everyone has to like string together 75 like good days. And if you don't string together 75 good days, you miss one day, you have to go back to the beginning. And for the extreme personality, the extreme person, that is just like candy. Like that is just like what you need, what you want. And, when you came with Moderation 365, you were like right where that is. And like, what was I'm going to call it a rock bottom. Like, what was that point where you're like, you know what? I just can't go hard anymore.
Yeah, and not only can I not, and what was the reality was showing me that I couldn't, but I didn't want to anymore. And I think you do have to, in your sort of nutrition journey, you have to get to the point where you're okay with things not being so extreme. So 75 hard and some of these things really play to our personal sense of wanting a complete overhaul, especially if you maybe you're listening to this and you really don't feel comfortable in your skin. There's a lot of like desperation around, I just want my clothes to fit better. Like, oh, I just hate the way I look. I'm avoiding the mirror. Like there's just a lot of like desperate sort of miserable energy about that. And that's a whole separate conversation because that also is a choice to feel that way. But especially if you have had a time in your life where the extremes worked. So if you're listening to this and you know Kim and you kind of know what she's been through and maybe you've been through something similar, you've seen yourself be really lean at some point. Something you've done in the past did work for a time. How many times have you heard this, Kim, from people who are like, I just need to go back to Weight Watchers. And I'm like, if Weight Watchers was the sustainable solution, you'd keep doing it, right? So people are like, oh, I just need to give up sugar. I did that 21-day sugar detox and oh my God, I didn't crave any sugar. And I'm like, if that was the solution for you, you would never start eating sugar again.
Right.
And so I think the lens that we have to look through, and this is also why things like CrossFit and P90X and some of these more extreme fitness programs were also so huge because they played on that idea of like, hey, no moderation. Let's go to extremes. Let's get that full transformation, that full overhaul, clean slate, because we all have this desire to be someone who's in control, to be someone who has willpower. And oftentimes, especially with social media, we look around and we see other people who are shredded, and we see people who seemingly make eating a competition diet or something very clean possible. And we're like, why is it so hard for me if those people seem to be doing it okay? And so for me personally, I had a lot of shame because I kept sort of falling off.
Yeah.
Like your competition diet, it did work for a certain period of time. I competed for about 6 years, and then I kept thinking that I needed to have that look again. And the only way to achieve that look was to eat the way that I've been eating and exercise the way I've been exercising. But this, like your body doesn't respond the same way every time.
Right.
And what was happening was my cravings started going through the roof. My hunger started going through the roof. My energy was all over the place. I was moody. And also I wasn't getting the same result physically. So I felt like I had to do more cardio, and the whole sort of like cardio trap is if the more you do, the more hungry you get, whatever. And so as a result of that, I kept falling off the wagon. I kept beating myself up. Like, why can't I do this? Like, what's wrong with you? I would just like literally say to myself, what's wrong with you, Jill? You can't go one day without sweets. Like, you have zero willpower. And I remember being like, this also isn't working. And I had, that was the moment for me where I realized that every single week, literally week after week after week, I was doing the exact same thing. I was literally like, this week's going to be the week. I'm going to like tighten up. I'm going to do the thing. And then every weekend, of course, I would binge Friday through Sunday. And I had to just wake up to the reality of, as much as I wanted it to work, as much as I had the best intentions for it to work, it kept not working. And so I had just finished up like about 9-month stint where I was dieting for a bunch of fitness competitions and photo shoots. And I didn't have anything else on my calendar at the end of it. And that was the moment where I was like, okay, Jill, you have no more shows, you have no more shoots. You have to figure out a way to eat forever. You have to figure out what that looks like, because you can't keep doing this. And that was the moment where I would do small things to start eating moderately. I'm like, I have no idea what that looks like. Right. But I know that this over here doesn't work. So what's the opposite of that? So instead of binging, because I was doing both, right? I was doing both extremes, deprive, binge, let me see if I could do something in the middle. Now, this was terrifying because before, right? At least before, it was familiar. So even though it was miserable, at least I knew, okay, I know what that feels like. I know what that feels like. I had no idea what moderation looked like. And if you asked me at that time, and I'm sure the same way, could you have a couple bites of something and leave it? The answer would be no, hell no. I have to eat the entire thing till it was gone, get it away, get it out, out of sight, out of mind. So the idea that I would have like a half a protein bar, or, and I started with small things like a sprinkle of cheese, you know what I mean? Like it wasn't too crazy. Like, I'll have a protein shake. And over time, I started being like, I guess I could have a glass of wine on like a Tuesday, and I could have like a little, bacon on Wednesday, and I could have some chocolate on Thursday. And it was terrifying because I was worried that I'd still binge, right? What if I give myself all these, I call them nutritional gimmies, these little satisfaction factor, a little like nutritional relief. What if I give myself those and then I still binge? Then it's, then I'm really screwed. But what happened over time was the binging became less and less, to the point where I wasn't doing it at all anymore, because I was feeling satisfied every day. And so it took me about 3 full years actually to make the switch. So it is, but I think that's the thing that you were alluding to, which it needs to finally just be a decision. It needs to be a choice that you're okay with.
Well, you said a couple of things. The first place is that you and I both have a lot of people who come from the competition world that follow us. And so I really feel like a lot of people, and I was there, if I do another show, I'm going to maintain it this time. This time I'm not going to like, we all had the day after show, and it was like bottles of wine, and like, you just like woke up with this like food covering. You're just like, you don't even know what you ate. You're like, could you deprive for so long? And so many people would be say you like, I can't do that. Like, I have to always be chasing another thing in order for it to work.
Totally. Yeah. And you know what, if I'm honest, it felt organized. They've actually shown in research that people are more excited about a diet before they start it than they are when they're actually doing it, which makes sense, right? So we love, and we love these start dates. We love things we're working towards. We like to have a plan. I used to have whole Excel spreadsheets with all of my meals at the like down to the minute of like when I would eat them. And it just felt organized. It felt in control. And the problem with that is that kind of control, right? I need to be eating my food out of my Tupperware, made in my kitchen, is that it's really fragile. It's a really fragile way to live. And at the time, like I said, I was in my head, it felt in control. And if I'm honest, and this is embarrassing to admit, I liked it. I'd go to the grocery store and see people with like chips and soda and stuff in their carts, and I'd be like, oh, like, look at this person, no self-control, It
was a badge of honor.
Right. Until it was me with no self-control, right? Until it was me who couldn't stay with it, until it was me that was binging on junk food. And I had to like pick my head up and look up and be like, oh, damn, this isn't working either. So when it was good, it was really good. And then when it was bad, it was really bad. And so that sort of gap created a lot of shame. And I was like, I felt embarrassed. People had seen me super lean for the stage weeks before. right? And then all of a sudden you rebound. And like you said, the intention is to keep it off, but you just can't. And I think that's where we sometimes go wrong is we make it about us. We're like, oh,
Yeah.
I'm bad. I'm not good. I can't stand this thing. I'm weak, right? Versus it's your physiology. Literally having cravings, being hungry, wanting to eat junk food. It's not a character flaw. It's literally your physiology is so deprived. So
Right.
as much as you wish you could, and here's the thing, maybe you have someone like a Nicole Wilkins or someone who's able to hold on and diet for a year or two. For most of us, 12 weeks, maybe 6 months,
Maybe.
but that physiology is always going to catch up to you. And that doesn't mean that you're a bad person. It doesn't mean you're a weak person. It just means that's how your body literally is built biologically, biochemically, physiologically, and even psychologically, right? Like if you say I can't have something, it's all I can think of.
Oh, absolutely.
And so I think the first things first, just like get real with yourself, and also remove the emotion. I think we have a lot, I don't know. I know for me, like getting into competition was just an extension of my perfectionism, right?
I laugh because like both you and I aren't emotional people, but when I was getting ready for a show, like anything could set me off.
Totally.
Anything would set me off. So I was like, you're just eating like literally like Tic Tacs and Diet Coke to get ready for the show. Like you have like you don't have enough food in your system to think right.
Well, and you attach your self-worth to being able to diet, right? To being able to be successful at this thing. So the second you're not successful at it, you go, I guess I'm not worthy. I guess I'm like chopped liver. I guess I'm just not good, you know? And so we really attach, like, I need to look a certain way. And especially because I think we feed into that. What are you doing? When's your show? You look amazing. You've lost some weight. You're so shredded. And then you get addicted to that level of affirmation, that approval, and all those comments. And then when you regain the weight, which inevitably you will, no matter who you are, then you're like, where are the comments, right? Oh, I just need to get back to what I was doing before. So if you don't talk about this, and I'm so grateful we're having this conversation, because I was completely unaware of all of this, not only before, but while it was going on. So it's only now that I can look back and be like, oh, that's why I was addicted to needing to look a certain way, even though it was extremely unhealthy. And so you have to kind of have perspective, and I think age helps as well. And competing priorities, like, you know, you have this podcast, you have an amazing business, you have a bunch of clients you're helping, like there's purpose and self-worth there too.
Right.
I think when you're so focused, I always say that body obsession is a low hanging fruit.
Yeah. It's, well, you know, and I always say this too, like, you know, you think about like all the shit we have going on in our life. Some things I don't have control over, but I have control over what I eat, how much time I spend in the gym. I have so much control over that. So it's easier for me to gravitate towards that than all the other bullshit that's going on in my life.
Totally. It's a control mechanism. You know, exercise for me became, I don't talk about this as much because Moderation 365 is mostly about food, but I was addicted to exercise, you know, and what was a good thing, right? Going to the gym consistently, whatever, turned into an obsession. And I remember having this moment. I was doing 2 hours of cardio a day, and I just woke up one morning and I was like, I started crying. I was like, I just don't have the energy to do 2 hours today, but I'm going to make myself do it. Right. Because that's what you do. Right. And I never asked myself, like, what would happen if I just skipped a day? Like, I never even like considered that. And so I don't know exactly what I was scared of, but I think that we have. So I think even just if you're listening to this conversation, chances are you're sort of starting to question maybe some of your old patterns, which is good. By the way, I would never even been open to a podcast like this when I was obsessed. Right?
No, not. I'm like, that's not me. Like, that's someone else.
That's someone who they can't hack it, right? They're not, they're just, you know, they're too weak. I wouldn't have said that, or probably wouldn't have thought that consciously, but I would have been like, oh, that's not for me. Like, that's not hardcore enough. Right. And so the fact that you're even listening to this episode and you're like exposing yourself to this idea means you're on the journey. It means you're questioning things. It means that, you know, you want a different reality for yourself. And I think it all starts there. Yeah.
And, you know, I think my moment was like, I was on the Stairmaster crying because it was my birthday, and my husband like texted me that he could find a place to get whitefish and greens for my birthday dinner. And I was like, is this my life? Is this my life? That my husband couldn't just take me out to dinner for my birthday. He had to call restaurants. And the fact that he did call restaurants, I was like, really? You did that for me? I'm like, okay, clearly it's my birthday. But it was like, that's the point. That was like my like rock bottom, that I was like, you know, this is ridiculous. And I remember crying on the bus ride home, and everyone looking at me, and I'm like, it's fine.
You're like, yeah, it's all in the name of something else. Like,
Right.
just wait, when I'm on it'll all be pay off when when I'm on stage. And I think for a time it does. And I think that's why it's so addictive. How many times you see these, posts on social media, someone up on stage, just got off stage and they're like, I'm so disappointed I didn't get first, but wait till next time, I'm going to come back better than ever next time. I'm like, you just got off stage 5 minutes ago, so it's addictive sort of like, and then you have to ask yourself, like, what's at the end of that? I know for me, it was a plastic trophy. Right. Like, really, when I think about it, it didn't help me make money. It didn't help me make a bigger impact in the world. It wasn't even really inspiring to anybody. It was like me having like a banging body wasn't helping the world. It wasn't helping people. So I think when you move from, it's all about me, low hanging fruit, am my abs showing? Am I good enough? Whatever, to a more mature outlook, which is, how is this helping the world? How is this servicing anyone else? Well, that's just your family. If you have kids and you're listening to this, like, you might need to ask yourself, like, what example you're setting for your children. Are they always going to not feel good enough? Are they always going to have to, because it's a battle you can't win, right? Yeah. You get off stage, they tell you, well, we really like your conditioning, but we got to get your legs down. Awesome. Right. So then you get your legs down, then you're like, okay, but now your shoulders, you got to get your shoulders up. And you're like, okay, but now I get my shoulders up, but now like, I'm just not as functional as I once was. Right. And then I got to get more functional. So there's always something. Yep. So I think at some point, good enough has to be good enough. Yeah. And I think, one of the things I love about the whole moderation part is that we're always going to be chasing something. That's just, we are A++ with a side of A++ people. That's just who we are. But that chase, can it be something outside of your body? Because at some point, your body's going to give you the finger and be like, enough, like no more. Like, I cannot give you one more ounce, one more muscle, one more anything. And your metabolism just hits the shitter. And you're just like, you're left with like, I can't eat any less. And I can't go to 3 hours of cardio. So at some point you have to say, like, like you had to take that leap of faith, which is so scary. It's scary. So scary, because you know you're what you know, and you don't, and the unknown is just like, whoa, like it's going into a dark room. Totally. I mean, and I remember the first week of that. So, I kind of shared how I sort of started having what I called nutritional gimmies, or giving myself these like little nutritional relief throughout the week. But really the biggest transition for me happened. And what we're talking about right now really is this idea of like, I need to have control over this, to do I trust myself, right? Like, that's really, we're making this shift from control to trust. They're opposites in my mind. And really being able to trust yourself is the highest level of control, right? Because if I trust myself, then I don't have to control anything else. So that moment for me was, I remember I had been like probably 6 or 7 years that I had always done Sunday food prep, because that's the thing in our space, right? Like, you have to prepare on Sunday, or else like, who knows, like, you can't trust yourself. Like, you got to have your food ready. If you don't have your food ready, like, it's off to the races. And I remember being like, I'm so sick of this food. I'm so sick. I'm not a good cook. Everything tastes disgusting. I'm so sick of this diet food. I'm not going food shopping this week. I'm not doing Sunday food prep. I literally was at the point where it was like, if I gain 50 pounds overnight, I just do not care. Like, I can't. I'm fine. Totally. I go, if I'm going to end up at the McDonald's drive-through every meal, whatever. I'm fine with it. What happened that week was nothing, basically nothing. So I had like maybe a couple extra protein shakes, sort of convenience foods, maybe some takeout salads that had some cheese on it. Like, but at the end of the week, I didn't gain. I didn't end up at McDonald's. Right. And I needed to have that experience to create a show of evidence that I could do this. And I was like, wow, I'm never prepping food ever again. Like, after that week, that was it. And so there's this little gap, like you mentioned, this like little leap that you have to take, that you don't know what's going to happen. And that's really hard for someone who wants to be in control of their food and their body and their exercise all the time. You have to make that little trusting leap. And what I did that week was just a show of evidence of self-trust. Right. Okay, like, it's not perfect, but I survived and my clothes still fit. Like, maybe I could do it again next week. Maybe I could do it again the week after. Right. And so you need to have these little shows of evidence that you can trust yourself moving forward. So whatever that looks like for you, maybe, and I do this in my course, the Moderation 365 course, like, I'm like, you're not prepping food this week. And I know it's not for people who work at a, corporate job or a desk or whatever, maybe you have to prep some stuff, but what other ways can you create a little bit of uncertainty for yourself, and then watch yourself survive it, and then start building up those reps. And then you'll get to the point where you're like, oh, I can go anywhere, anytime, and trust myself to make a healthy choice.
Right. And and I think that's what the big thing is, like the trust. It's like knowing what your choices are. Just instead of like immediately thinking your choice is always going to be this negative, like I'm going to be spending my time like, eating at Taco Bell
Right.
versus being like, well, you know what? I could go to Whole Foods and they have a whole salad bar. Or I could go to Trader Joe's and they have those bag salads. And so it just like makes you think of like the options where you get so like vapor locked. Like if I don't make my chicken, broccoli, and brown rice, it's gonna fail.
Right. Or it's not gonna be good enough, right? Like, so
Right.
I'm thinking to myself, even as you're saying that, I'm like, I know that Whole Foods has a salad bar, but it's not going to be as healthy as when I make it home. So I might as well just go to McDonald's, right? It's
Right.
just like this weird sort of, it's all or nothing thinking, right? Where if it can't be perfect,
Yeah.
then we might as well go all the way to the other end, which makes zero sense. But somehow we sort of trained our brain to think if it's not 100% perfect, then I might as well. An example would be like, I don't know, like I don't eat pizza all that much, not because it's not fine, but like it's just not something I crave a lot. But sometimes I have like a slice. So moderation would look like, yeah, I'll have a slice of pizza, no issues. And then have like, I don't know, side salad maybe, maybe a glass of wine. Like that would be a moderate meal.
Right.
But I think 10 years ago, it would have been like, I'm eating pizza, so I'm going to make the most of it.
Exactly.
I'm already one step in, might as well go the whole way. So I'm going to have the
Exactly.
entire pizza plus an entire bottle of wine and just do it up good, right? Do it all the way up. Because tomorrow, I know this is going away. So when we talk about the Moderation 365 curriculum, is this idea of this sort of like promise of future deprivation.
Yeah.
So I know for Monday, I can't have pizza on Monday. So I have to do it up right now because I know in the future, this is going to be off limits. And so it's that promise of future deprivation that makes us eat more now. Probably shit we don't even want to eat and quantities we don't want to eat, but we know that at some point it's going to be off limits. So we remove that and go, yeah, you can have a slice of pizza on Monday. Then all of a sudden you're not in this like sort of scarcity mindset.
I laughed because a few weeks ago I had pizza and I had like 2 pieces and I was totally full and satisfied, but there was like 1 piece left. Old Kim would have been like, can't leave leftovers. And I was like, no, I'm like, I can leave this leftover. And if I want it in a couple hours, I'll just heat it up. And it was just, like what, like, that like immediately brought back. I'm like, oh my God, like I would have just ate that just to eat it and be uncomfortable all afternoon because I had to eat it.
It's all or nothing thinking. And you have to have, and I'm glad you even had that awareness because honestly, like that's the thing is most of us don't stop and think like, oh yeah, what would the old Kim do? And what's more of a moderate choice? What's a healthier choice here? What's a less neurotic choice here? Right. And then we in real time break the habit. That's, I think, the key, right? So we can have this conversation. You can be listening to this episode and you're like nodding along, like, yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Change happens when the rubber meets the road. So for you having that insight, and if you're listening to this, if you have a moment where you can choose moderation or choose all or nothing, you have to have that awareness and then go, yeah, why couldn't I just put this away? I'll give you guys another example. So when I was, you're probably the same way, Kim, when I was competing and I was doing a ton of cardio, on the cardio machine, I had certain numbers I would have to hit. Now, first of all, the calorie counter on the machines aren't even accurate. But for me, I'd go, okay, I have to burn 800 calories on cardio today or something like that. And it need to be a round number.
Yes.
Just like you're neurotic, right? So now I'll go to the gym and I'll do like 10 minutes of intervals. So I'm at 10 minutes and the calorie count said 143 calories. What do you think the old me would have done?
Why is it 150?
A little more, right? Let's get to 150. Oh, we're already 150. Let's get to 200, right? Round. I found myself, and it wouldn't have been a big deal, right? It's only 7 calories, whatever, a couple more minute or something like that. But I caught myself in real time going, nope, that's the old neurotic Jill. Get off the stair mill. Leave it at 143.
Right. You said 10 minutes, it's 10 minutes, the end.
Yeah. So you have to catch yourself in those moments where you go, yeah, the neurotic, the obsessed old version of me. And now, again, it's not a big deal, but it's a small example of just reiterating to yourself who you really want to be and what you don't want to be anymore. And so having those moments, so like you can have this awareness, but what do you do when the rubber meets the road, where there's an opportunity to act like a different person? What do you do? Having to recognize those moments like you did, like I did, and then choose the less obsessed version of you. That's how change is made, these little tiny decisions.
And I think, before I kind of dive into like, if I'm listening to this and I'm agreeing and I'm thinking like, gosh, I need to do this. Where do you like, I think one of the biggest challenges, and you see this in all the businesses that you run, the small. We are so, trained, I remember when I first started working out, it was the Solaflex commercials. And it was like, go big or go home. And if you didn't go big or go home, then you might as well just stay on the couch. And it's like the little things, like, you saying, I'm going to stop at 143, win. Me saying, I don't need that pizza, win. Where people feel like the win has to be, I didn't have the pizza, or I didn't get on the Stairmaster. Like it has to be this huge thing in order for it to count, to be enough.
Yeah.
So, that person who's listening, like, how can we start to get, like, I just want, my whole goal in this life is like, how do I change a dialogue that like small is still worthy?
Yeah. And this is like literally the $1 million question, isn't it? Is like, how do you get someone? Because I agree with you. I do think there's this idea of, well, if I don't do an hour at the gym, then why would I even go? I'm going to drive 10 minutes for 40 minutes.
Right.
And I'm like, and it's funny because actually I do business coaching, as you know, and I had a client who was trying to get some of her time back. She was personal training people for an hour and she's trying to get her time back. And I was like, well, could you move your sessions to 45 minutes? And she goes, I said, could you deliver the same exact result in 45 minutes instead of an hour? And she goes, absolutely. And I go, well, why don't we make that change? She goes, well, I feel bad. They're coming all the way to the gym. And I was like, you just told me you can get them the same result and you don't want to give them their 15 minutes back to do something else that day, right? Like to go grocery shopping or hanging with the kids or whatever. But it's this idea that if you're not there for an hour, then it's not good enough. So you might as well not even. So it's this, it's all or nothing thinking, right? It's just this sort of all or nothing. And for me, one of the things that really helps is viewing all my health behaviors as cumulative. So that has really helped me. So I look at it like this, we're sort of on a spectrum, right? We have like, complete couch potato over here. We have like obsessive, neurotic, exerciser, fitness person, like whatever over here. And I go, okay, every choice that I make moves me, closer to health or further away from health. Now, I think there's this sort of like, bell-shaped curve, right? You have to find that sweet spot. But I always go like, for me, 5 minutes is better than 0 minutes.
Exactly.
And, right. Like 10 minutes is better than like whatever, like, and sometimes 20 minutes is better than an hour. It really is. It's both. And so one thing that really helped me, because I was such in a time mentality, was focusing on intensity instead. Yeah. And that was really hard because I was just trained that, and you guys know this, if you believe the whole calories in versus calories out thing, you go, well, if I do more, I burn more calories and that's better. That's not necessarily better, because we've just said earlier in the show that there's compensatory response, right? More hunger, more cravings. Now I refuse to do more cardio because I know I'm gonna be starving. Right. I know I'm going to be craving stuff. So I'm like, no, I'm not going to do that. So asking yourself, what's that sweet spot? And there is a point of diminishing returns. More isn't always better. And so what is that sweet spot for you? So me focusing on intensity, because here's the thing, if you're working out hard, there's no way you can go for an hour, 2 hours like I used to do. I used to watch whole television shows on my iPad. Like, right.
I wouldn't even know who a Kardashian was if it wasn't for cardio.
Exactly. And so really focusing on intensity helped me. And you, again, back to, you need to show yourself the evidence. My body, not only did my body get bigger, all the things I was really scared of, I started looking better, started looking more athletic, started gaining more muscle, started like feeling better in my clothes, like lost some inches in certain places.
Probably just started feeling better overall.
Totally. Like, and my cravings went way down. My hunger went way down. Started doing things like leisure walking, sleeping more. And all of a sudden I'm like, wow, my metabolism, this is what a healthy metabolism feels like, right? I should be waking up and start crying immediately. Right. So, you need to tap into some of those things, but it is an addictive behavior. So if you find yourself going down that sort of rabbit hole, ask yourself, is there a switch that we can make here? But to your point, I think that really is the $1 million question, is how do you get someone to see that 5 minutes? Like one of my things is something isn't nothing. Like I always tell my girls, something isn't nothing, and it's hard mentality, but you do have to make peace with compromise. You do have to realize that you've tried to do all the things and you keep failing. And that was my moment. You keep trying to do all the most and you keep not being able to do it. So let's figure out a different way of doing things.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that, because it's like, so you said that the way we start this whole moderation piece is to start with like small things. And for many people, the workout is really a lot of it. Like, oh my God, I have to be there at 2 hours. Like if I don't, and I know I was that person. If I wasn't there 2 hours, why go? And so it started with like 15 minutes. It was like, okay, I'm going to only be here an hour and 45.
Yeah. I was going to say, yeah, you definitely start slowly pulling back like that. Because here's the thing is like, you go, okay, now I'm going to do 145. Now I'll do 130. Now I'll do an hour 15. And then you see that you didn't blow up like you thought you were going to. You didn't gain all this weight like you thought you were going to. And you're like, I guess it's safe for me. And that's exactly what I did. I started slowly pulling back. And then at some point I actually quit my gym membership. And I was just like, you know what? I'm just going to work out outside. Like, I'm just going to do, like, I had some dumbbells at home. I, had a track that I would go to. There's a little stadium there. And I did all my workouts. I actually wrote a blog on it. Like, I quit my gym membership and I started looking, I wouldn't say better, but I started, because neither one was better or worse. Right. I started looking different. I started looking more athletic. My hunger went down. My cravings went down. I had no more binging episodes. If you're listening to this and you feel like this is not possible for you, I guarantee that it is, because Kim and I were all or nothing people, like to the T. If I can do it, anyone can do it. If you can do it, anyone can do it. But you have to have that little belief that it's possible for you. And that's why I like having these conversations, because I want to show people like, hey, you don't need to be, in fact, this is easier than, at this point, it's easier than ever to choose healthy and to eat healthy forever. I never think about food, ever. And that doesn't mean that I eat everything I want, because that's thinking about food a lot, right? That's stressing about food a lot. I think there's this idea that, like, if you think about it more, you'll make better decisions. And again, there's a bell-shaped curve, right? Because too much thinking about it is obsession. No thinking about it is what I call sort of brain shutdown mode. When we start binging, we just pretend it's not happening, right? Just like, I'll deal with this later. There's a middle ground, and that middle ground is mindfulness. And we talk about mindfulness in the moderation cert, and like how to learn what that is, because it's one of those words too, just like moderation, where you're like, yeah, mindfulness is for your grandma, right? Like, or you associate it with like these yogis, or like, like going, but it's not, it's literally just having a low level of awareness of like what's going on in your body. And it's a practice. And what we try and do in Moderation 365 is really help people feel what that's like and practice it, because it is a practice. But it's one of those things that once you start practicing it, it becomes second nature, to the point where you're always, like you said, you're always, when you had your 2 slices of pizza, you're like, I was full, I was good, I was satisfied, didn't need to have any more. And when you diet for a long time, it makes you stupider, like in a way, because it takes you out of your body. So instead of thinking, am I hungry right now? Am I craving anything? How full am I? You're going, well, it's 2:00, time to eat. There's no consideration for anything that's happening physiologically. You're just eating according to a clock. So in a way, learning to eat moderately and mindfully is really unlearning a lot of diet behaviors.
And that was the biggest thing that for me was to unlearn my diet behavior, and was eating by the clock. That was, because you grew up in the same philosophy. If you don't have 5 meals equally spaced, you're going to die. And
your metabolism will slow down. You'll lose all your muscle.
And I believe that hook, line, and sinker. And then eventually, like, I was just eating too much, because I was eating too much, too rapidly. And my body wasn't even having a chance to like recognize I had food before I stuffed more food back in me.
I was like, all right, only 2 hours and 59 more minutes till I can eat again.
Yes. Oh my God. My whole world revolved around my freaking clock. And then it was like, when I started having metabolism, my doctor was like, Kim, so I want you to wait till you're hungry. I was like, what the hell?
Well, I was also starving all the time. So that was also a problem.
Yeah. She's like, I want you to wait till you're hungry. And then she goes, I don't want you to measure. I just want you to eat until you're full. That's it. And I was like, and that was like the scariest moment. But it was doctor ordered. So I was like, well, I have to do it. It's kind of doctor ordered. I paid her to tell me what to do. And it was scary, but it's like, at the same time, it forced me to realize that, like, I don't need 5 meals.
Yeah. And also so you need to recognize that, right? But you need to be given the chance to recognize that, because I think as humans, and I'm sure your clients are the same way, like initially we come in and we want to be told what to do. Just give me the rules. How many times have you heard from a client, just tell me what to eat and I'll eat it. And we know it's so much more complicated than that. And I'm like, no, we're going to help you arrive at what works for you food wise, like how many meals, what does that look like? What times does that look like? And that takes a lot of self-knowledge. It takes a lot of self-awareness. It takes a lot of like eating something and then like seeing how your body responds to it. So I've sort of ended up at like 2 large meals and 2 snacks. That's it.
Right.
2 large meals, 2 snacks. And I have a pretty high fat diet. So I don't need a ton of carbs, not because carbs are bad, but because I just don't do well on them. But I notice that. So people will be like, oh, are you on low carb? You doing keto? I'm like, no, this is how I normally eat because this is what works best for me. I crave fats. That works a lot better for me than I don't like sit around craving potatoes or chips or crackers, whatever. That's not my thing. But wine, coffee, chocolate, fatty foods, cream, stuff like that, for sure. And so I always say you have to pick and choose your nutrition battles.
Right.
Like, where are your big non-negotiables? Where are the things that you know about yourself that you're unwilling to negotiate on? And then what can you just like, you're just not, I remember when I was competing after a show, I was eating all sorts of shit I didn't even like. Like I was literally stuffing it down my face because I could at this point. And I was like, I don't even like this cracker or this thing. I'm just eating it because it's here.
And
so
I can.
You need to relearn discernment too.
Right.
You need to relearn discernment. You need to relearn what works best for you and put the blinders on, because there's always going to be someone starting a new diet, trying a new diet, saying they're getting results on something. But once you master this, you know what works for you. And I know it sounds so cliche, but you do know what works for you. And like, you're like, good luck to anyone trying something else. You go, I already know that's not for me because I already arrived at what works perfectly for me.
Yeah. No, I loved exactly what you said, is that we have to do a lot of experimentation. And the big thing here is that experiments take patience. And, you know, people want that, like, just take this one blue pill a day and, you know, you'll be fixed.
It also takes a little risk, right? So like, you have to like try something and then like see what happens. One of the things I always tell my clients is you can always go back to the old way, right? Like, say you try this thing, doesn't work. Look, the cardio isn't going anywhere, right? The calorie counting, the obsessive, the extremes, not going anywhere. So if you always need to, you can go back to that. But why don't we try something different? Give me 2 weeks, right? Let's see if we can start creating a show of evidence that you can actually do this.
Yeah. And it's one of the best things I took away from you. This is like years ago when we first started working together, was the non-negotiables. And I always ask my clients, what are your non-negotiables? Like, what are the things that you just absolutely love? And if you took them away, you would just go ape shit. And for me, it's coffee. I was like, you take away my coffee with cream and sugar in it, I will beat you. But, but anything else, I'm like, I could live without that. It's all right. It's fine. Yep. But it's like, you know, I always tell people, like, when you try to pull away things you absolutely love, that's when there's going to be a problem.
Right. Cause then you're like, so let's say like, you're like, all right, I'm giving up coffee because someone told you couldn't have coffee. You'd be like, all right, I'm going to have, like, you would just be drinking like a bunch of diet sodas. And then like, you'd be like trying to just get that taste, right? You'd be trying to like get that high some other way, in a way that's like never going to satisfy you like coffee does. Just have a coffee. You know, when people are like, what do you do when you have cravings? I'm like, I eat the thing I'm craving. But I practice, right? I practice mindfulness. Mindfulness is, I always call it the Mac Daddy tool, because it's the thing that allows for you to have a couple bites of something and then leave it for later, right? You can come back to it later if you're still craving it. It's always going to be there. It's whatever. And I know that concept really terrifies people. I can't even have it in my house. I can't, you don't know, Jill, like I can't even be around it. I'm like, believe me, I do know, because that was exactly me. But you have to have this practice and this belief that it's possible for you, and then start taking the strategic steps to do it. So this is one of the tools that we use in moderation, is called intermittent sampling, which is essentially exposure therapy. So maybe you've heard this in research studies. People who are scared of spiders will like put them in a room with a spider, but the spider be like way over there and it'll be like in a cage, right? So like, that's the first thing, is like, just be in the room, have the experience of being in the room with a spider. It's in a cage, can't get you, anything like that. Then the next time they'll bring it like a little closer, and you're like, okay, you have to like endure that. And the next time, maybe it's like in the room with you, but it's like not in a cage, right? But maybe it's on the other side. And so it's this idea that we have to expose ourselves to things that we're scared of. So whatever food item that you think you can't trust yourself around, we have to intentionally buy that food, keep it in the house. And by the way, this is completely counterintuitive to every piece of health advice you see on, you know, if we see this, like these personal trainer television shows where like personal trainer comes to the house, takes all the food out of the cabinet, throws it in the trash. It's like this big dramatic thing. We're saying, you know what? I actually want you to have ice cream. I want you to let's have a portion every single night this week. And if you want more, just wait 20 minutes, right? If you have to set your timer on your phone, wait 20 minutes and then literally assess, do I want another serving? Yes or no? If you do, no issues, no judgment, go get it, right? then wait another 20 minutes. Let's see how that goes. Then
Right.
you just gives yourself time to assess. I always tell people, I don't care if you eat the whole pint. I care how you eat the whole pint.
Right.
Don't care if you eat the whole bag of chips. I care how you eat it.
Right.
Because that mindfulness practice of going, do I want more? Yes or no, is mindfulness. That literally, it's a really small practice, but over time you go, you know what? I don't want ice cream tonight. Right? You've exposed yourself to the point where it loses its illicitness. It loses its hold over you because you're just around all the time. We see this all the time with parents. They'll have kids' snacks in the cabinet all the time, but they don't eat them because it's just around all the time, right? They're not eating their kids' gummy snacks. They're able to be around those, but if you ask them if they, want to have some Ben and Jerry's in the house, be like, no. Same exact thing. We just have to get them used to it being there. And then it becomes no issue. But that's a really scary sort of practice, but it does work. And that's one of the things that we teach people in the course.
So ice cream, perfect example, but so like say, I'm just a junk food junkie. So am I better off focusing on exposing myself to one thing at a time versus, the chips, the ice cream, the candy, or am I better all right, I'm just going to buy ice cream in the house. I'm going to focus on ice cream and then move on to the next thing.
Yeah. One thing at a time, pretty much is typically what we recommend, just so that you can see that it's possible. Right. Yeah. And then at some point you're like, oh, actually I'm good. So I'll give you a little story. So I used to love, one of my biggest things when I was competing was rainbow chip frosting. Do you know what that is?
Yeah.
Like the super sweet, like it almost burns your tongue. It's so sweet, but it has those little rainbow chips. And I just my mouth is actually watering just thinking about it. This is me. So then I've been practicing moderation for years and years. And I was like, I saw it at the grocery store and I was like, we'll just get some. Not as anything, just oh, it's so delicious. I'll have a bite. Literally it sat in my fridge. I had I don't know, maybe one bite a day or every couple days for a couple weeks. And then I was like, oh, I forgot it was in there, threw it out. So it's good to just do these little checks on these foods that used to have so much power over you, but then you go, oh, I can take it or leave it. Now, if you're listening to this and you're like, I could never do that, Jill, you don't understand. I get it. That's how I started, but you have to start really practicing. And for me, I actually practiced with Reese's Pieces. That was always my kryptonite. And my brother, God bless him, got me a huge bag, those massive bags for my birthday one year. And I remember when I opened it, I was literally like, get this out of my house. I was so nervous for it to be in my house. And I just started making a ritual out of it. So every day after lunch, I would just go into the bag. I would take my hand and I would grab the biggest handful I could. And I would put it into a little sort of little, a little tiny bowl. And I would bring it over and I would eat them one or two at a time. Now, I know this stuff feels really granular when we talk about it like this, but over time, it took me probably a month and a half to finish the bag, but it was just giving myself that. And I wasn't obsessing with it. I was just oh, I'm good, right? If I wanted another serving, I would go and have it, but I just knew it was in there. So it lost its sort of allure over time. And so sort of just by accident, I started practicing in that way. And so I would start with just one thing, whatever, and this is scary, but whatever the top dog item is for you, let's get it in the house and let's practice.
Well, I also like the fact that how, it wasn't in this candy dish out on your counter, so that every time you walk by you could take one or two or whatever. And I also like what you said, the 20 minutes. So one of the biggest things, and when you were coaching competitors, the big thing is nut butters, right? So many people are make out with freaking peanut butter. And totally. I can't say I made out with peanut butter, but I will say that I had a little bit of an unhealthy relationship with it. It was that boyfriend that you kept breaking up with and making up with. That was peanut butter for me. And now I have peanut butter and almond butter in my refrigerator. And just that frosting, I was like, when was the last time I had some? I can't tell you. And I'm like, is it still good? I'm going to look when we get up to here. And I think to myself, I would just sit in it with the jar of peanut butter and just eat and just mindlessly eat while thinking about other things or watching TV. And I like how you said, have a tablespoon or whatever you just determine as you're serving, 20 minutes. Even if you set a timer on your phone, 20 minutes, walk away. And if you still have that desire, do another tablespoon.
No problem. To me, no issues. No judgment. Doesn't mean you're a weak person, bad person. Right. It's just cool, it's there, instead of mindlessly eating it. And, I think nut butters and neat peanut butter, almond butter, I think especially competitors, that's where we go. Cause it's the one sort of cheat that is kind of allowed on the diet. So also diversify ways you're feeling satisfied. So peanut butter isn't the only way you feel satisfied, right? Like, so that's what I did with moderation, was trying to figure out, okay, how can I feel satisfied daily
Right.
instead of having to wait for a Sunday cheat meal, right? Or
Yeah.
whatever, right? Like I'm like holding on all week so I can like blow my, have my cheat meal on Saturday night, versus like, could I just feel satisfied every day? What does that look
Yeah.
like? You know, and by the way, when I say satisfied and stuffed are different.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Satisfied is I'm not stuffed, right? Because stuffed is stressful.
Yeah.
Starving is stressful, stuffed is stressful. And if you're not practicing mindfulness, typically those are the only two things you feel, starving or stuffed, right? But satisfaction is really right in the middle. It's this feeling of like, I'm good. I always tell my girls, like, that's the phrase. You know what?
Right.
I could have more, but I'm good.
Right.
You know what? I could have more, but I'm good. So if you can generate that feeling of satisfaction on a daily basis, then you don't have one food that gets put up on this like odd pedestal.
Yes.
You know, so what does that sort of look like for you? So for me, it was things like sprinkle of cheese on my salad, couple, you know, slices of turkey bacon or bacon, like having a glass of wine, having a couple squares of chocolate, you know, even if you start with like stevia sweetened chocolates and stuff like that, like enlightened bars, things that are like healthier junk foods that still give you that taste that you desire.
Right.
Start with stuff like that, but don't make it mean, oh my God, I'm having cheese, which means I, you know, now I'm going to just eat an entire pizza. Like just stay with that one thing and then have those throughout the week.
Yeah, it's funny. I have a client who, you know, we first started working together. She would have like 10 of those like little Lindt chocolate squares. And I was like, all right, you told me you want to lose weight. I'm like, I'm not going to take away your chocolate squares because that's your non-negotiable, but they do have to have 10.
Right.
I was like, I go, so I want you to have one, but I want you to have one and just start to feel like, do I need the second one? Because she was having like 2 or 3 at a time. Like, have one, see if you need that second one. So it's like, we all have these like little experiments that we do. And sometimes experiments fail. And sometimes,
and that's okay.
And then eventually, like at some point, she was like, she was fine with 4. And so she saved so many calories by taking away 6, but she still had 4.
Yep.
So it's like, you kind of, and you know, like, I think the biggest thing most people have to take away is that like, you did this over years.
Totally.
Years of practicing, you know, it was the Reese's Pieces, it was the wine, it was this, and it was just like little things you practice. And eventually you're like, I can knit them all together as this is what moderation looks like for me.
You have to have a moment where you go, I don't want to diet anymore. Like, I don't want to keep doing what I'm doing. You have to have that. Cause that was, I think for me, having that insight and realizing that some of the consequences could have been weight gain. You know, I think at some point, or never losing weight ever again, never having that competition body again. And so maybe ask yourself, if I never lost another pound, would I be okay? Doesn't mean you won't and you can't, but you have to get your mind right for that. I think once you're fully there, it's funny. I have a lot of people, obviously with moderation, people are like, I love this concept. It sounds amazing. And by the way, it is amazing. Like it's literally zero stress. Eat what you want. Like you eat in the quantities that you want. You feel satisfied all the time. Like it is, but it is also work to get there. And they'll be like, oh my God, it's amazing. But I don't know. Like I need to count. I find myself, I still need to count. I'm like, you're not ready. You're not ready. And that's fine. Like we're not going anywhere. It's always going to be there, right? There's always that alternative. But if you're still feeling this deep desire, because I was at the point where like, I'm literally not counting shit like ever again, because I'm so miserable. So you have to get to the point where you're ready for a final solution and you're ready to like figure it out for good. And that's not lip service. Like you literally have to feel that in your bones and know that like, yeah, you might have to gain a couple of pounds. You may, you know, things might be uncomfortable for a little bit. In my experience, that was my experience, was I gained a little bit initially. When I say like gain, I mean like, I don't know, 5 pounds, 7 pounds. Like it wasn't massive, like my clothes still fit. And over time, I ended up losing that over the course of a couple of years. So that's really what we're talking about. I think sometimes we have these control mechanisms. We go, if I let this go, we think we're just gonna put on pounds and it's gonna be like this linear thing that like never ends and we never have any say over it. It's like, you always have a say, right? You can always practice mindfulness, but you have to have the courage to do it. And to your point, you do have to slow it down a little bit. You have to slow down your urgency and your sense of desperation and like all of this stuff to realize that it might take you a year, but imagine a year from now, you have a solution that works for you. All your clothes just fit. You don't think about food all the time. You're literally like, I can skip a couple of days of gym, no issue. No issue. Is that worth it? Most of us have been dieting for decades. What, we're not gonna take 1 year to figure it out for good? Come on, that's not. And you know, when I was starting and when you were too, Kim, no one was teaching this stuff. I wish they were. Now we have so many more resources. We have so many more tools. We have courses. We have stuff like that. there wasn't that. I was trying to figure it out myself, fumbling through it. So it took me 3 years. It might take you a year. So asking yourself, like, am I willing to do that? Am I willing to put in that practice? Can I be patient?
Yeah. And I love what you said, because it's like, if you, like you said, runaway train, like if I continue this way, like I'm never going to catch that train. But if I'm like, all right, I hit my rock bottom, and, I know it's a horrible analogy, but it's the only one that I can find that really works. If you have other analogies, magic makers, holla. Alcoholics, right? Everyone, like, one day you have that one drink that you're like, today's the day. Like, you don't know how it comes or what's going to make it happen, but like, you have that moment. I had my Stairmaster moment. You had your, I'm not meal prepping anymore. And it's just that one moment you're like, for the love of God, I can't. And when you get to that point of, for the love of God, I can't, that's when you have to step into that courage and be like, okay, how can it be different?
I'll do whatever it takes, because this over here, I can't do anymore. I'll do whatever. I just can't keep doing this.
All right. Because we've spent too many brain cycles. We could have probably cured cancer, corona, and any other pandemic that might come up. With all the brain cycles we've worked. I'm like, okay, if I have this, then I could have that. And then if I go to the cardio, I could do this. And I was like, I remember all of those like crazy thoughts I had about food and workouts, and like how to squeeze it in.
And also, it's so common, Kim. That's the thing, is like, we're talking about this and it sounds so like odd when you talk about it, but people are like, oh my God, me too. Like, I've talked about this, people are like, you do that too. And I'm like, yes, we all do that. There's no new nutrition stories, right? We all feel guilty. We all feel obsessive. We all have the mental calculation going all the time. If you have ever dieted for however in your life, you know what this feels like. We're constantly doing trade-offs. That's why when people say like, and my whole thing is like, if macros work for you, that's fine. Right. But when people say, I don't understand what's so hard about macros, it's just math. I'm like, that's not the hard part. The math is it's simple math. What is hard is that it's not benign to have an ongoing mental calculation going on in your head all the time. Not only is it not benign on like actual outcomes, but like other things in your life. I know for me, I wanted to figure it out because I wanted to have my business be successful. I wanted to give more time to my relationships. I didn't want to be so moody all the time. So you have to figure out, like, are there other things in my life, other ways of getting affirmation, diversifying ways I can feel affirmed that have nothing to do with how I look. And that's, a question to sort of ask yourself. And I think we go down that rabbit hole. Sometimes people don't even know how they got there. That was for me. Like, how did I even get here? Right? Stairmaster story. How is this my life right now? And so you have to dig your way out of that hole and figure out what that new version of you is going to look like and be okay with it. And I think that you have to have something else you're focusing on. You have to have something else that is bigger than, am I shredded? Are my abs showing? Like, you just do. And then once you have that, maybe it's your kids. Maybe for me, it was starting my business. For, someone else, it might be, having a new hobby or a new activity or a new skill they want to get good at. You have to figure out what the trade-off is going to be and what you're willing to do.
Yeah. And, I love all of this. And this whole conversation is great because Jill has the tools, right? The one thing that, Jill's taught me over the years, like, you have to have a strategy, right? You have to have a strategy. Like, you can have all the plans, but you have to have a strategy and a process, because with her Moderation 365, there's a process. And so that where you are in the roadmap, so that if you get lost or you get stuck, if you need to take a step back, or you can take a step forward. And so that's what I love about the Moderation 365. It's a process. It's not this like, I'll figure it out and then scroll on Instagram to find another solution.
Totally. I mean, that's the thing, is you have to really commit to it. Because like I said, one of my biggest pet peeves is I don't love the word moderation. I don't love the word mindfulness. I feel like these words have lost their meaning over time because people sort of roll their eyes, or their eyes gloss over like, mindfulness, right? So it's just been so used. So what we attempt to do, and what we do in the Moderation 365 curriculum, is break it down. So when I say moderation, here's what that looks like in real time. And here are the tools. These are the benchmarks. These are the things that we'll know if we're feeling this way, if we're having this experience, that's moderate, right? Like, that's moderate eating. Here's what that looks like. Mindfulness, the same thing. It's one of those very like sort of, nebulous words. When I explain to you intermittent sampling and exposure therapy, those are literally mindfulness practices. Right. So like those things, we actually go, cool, we're going to try it. We're going to do intermittent sampling tonight. Let's get ready. What food do we have? Cool. How did it go? We debrief after. So there are real tools and behaviors that start building mindfulness. Now, you're going to have to slow your roll on this because I know you want faster results. I know you want just it to work. The really cool thing about mindfulness practice is it's like a slingshot. It's like slow, 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 slow. And then all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I'm mindful all the time. Like that's literally how it works. It's like the practice at the beginning feels like pulling teeth. Like, oh my God, this seems so like it's taking a while. Like, why isn't this? And then all of a sudden you wake up and it's been like 2 months and you're like, oh, I just know how I feel in my body all the time. I'm in touch with my hunger. I'm in touch with my cravings. I'm in touch with my satisfaction, my fullness. But so it's like a slingshot. Does that make sense? Instead of just like being a linear thing, it's like, okay, yeah, I'm practice. And all of a sudden you wake up and you're different. The way you interact with your own body is different. And the way you actually interact with food is different. And so you do have to slow your roll, at least for a time, to practice some of these things. And then all of a sudden you wake up 6 months later and you have a completely different relationship with food. And I hear it. And the reason why I know is because not only with me, but like literally all of our clients have said this. Yeah. It's like, that's the goal.
Yeah. It's like, you have to get through that sticky part. And then eventually it's like, oh, I wait, I just had this and I didn't really need more. Oh, look at me.
Mm-hmm. I'm winning. It's almost like going back. It's like taking a step back to go 2 steps forward. You kind of have to do it that way.
1,000%. So Jill, everyone's hearing this Moderation 365. I'm like, oh, but I'm very interested. How do I do this?
Yeah. So we have 2 sort of ways that you guys can find out more information. Number one, you should definitely be following the Instagram account. Instagram is at Moderation365. We share a lot of the tools similar to some of the ones we shared here on that page. So you're obviously gonna, get access to a lot of different insights and things like that. And if this resonated with you, we have a lot of stories on there. And then we also have a certification for professionals. So, Kim, I think we'll probably provide that link for you guys if you're interested in getting certified in this method. Right now, we've certified over 100 professionals who are now teaching these steps, methodology, all this kind of stuff. And by the way, like we proved the system over the course of years. So we actually launched our first like direct to consumer Moderation 365 course in 2014. We had thousands of people go through it before we even launched the cert. So the cert has been vetted. And because Kim, like it's one thing to know something, it's another thing to coach it or to teach it. And so the certification takes things just one step further. If you feel like you are a professional and you work with clients who really need to have a better relationship with food and are really obsessed with the numbers and really want to get them out of that and practice in more mindfulness, that would be the next step. And of course, if you just are someone who's interested in learning about this, we have a course called Food Obsession Bootcamp that has all the like tools, strategies, and trainings. It's a 4-week kind of crash course in all of this education. And then of course, that's when the practice begins. So it doesn't take 4 weeks to master this stuff, but you get delivered the content and then you from there practice. There's some homework assignments and stuff like that. Very just like tangible, tactical, digestible information that you can start practicing. So like I said, we've had thousands of people go through that. It's a great program. And hopefully Kim can link that for you guys too.
Yeah, so all of this will be in the show notes. And so Jill, I asked one question to everyone on the show. What's one thing that makes you feel magical?
Such a good question. And I know you messaged me before, and I actually didn't think about it till today. The thing that makes me feel the most magical, honestly, is when I see my clients get incredible results. Because to me, that's when we talk about impact, we talk about meaning, we talk about purpose. I know we talked about that a little bit. This idea of like getting outside of like it just being about you. That's where when I see clients getting wins with this kind of stuff, and they're going, wow, I never thought this would be possible for me. I never thought that I could do this. Like, to me, that's everything. Yeah. And so what makes me feel more magical is seeing the ripple effect of, and knowing that my own journey wasn't for nothing, right? Like, I think that too is going, like now we've learned all this stuff and we're implementing this stuff and people are actually doing it and they're actually experiencing a huge lifestyle transformation and a huge life change. To me, that just, like, honestly, like my heart just explodes when I see stuff like that. So
I love that. I absolutely love that. So Jill, outside of the Moderation 365, where can people find you on the socials?
Yep. It's just at Jill Fit on all the things. So at Jill Fit on Insta, facebook.com/JillFit, and then JillFit.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for this conversation. And Magic Maker is like, seriously, moderation is possible, even though it's a word that I wish there could be another word to come up with, but there's a way for you not to like lose your shit when you're eating, not making out with your food. There is a way it's possible on the other side. You just have to have the courage to take the step.
You nailed it. Awesome. Thanks so much for having me, darling.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys.